The air inside the grand chapel shimmered with anticipation, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows that painted the marble floor in shades of gold and crimson. The scent of lilies and roses filled the hall, their fragrance mixing with the faint polish of wooden pews. The guests spoke in hushed tones, their laughter soft and hopeful, as if the walls themselves were protecting a sacred moment of joy. Sophia stood in her bridal chamber, a mirror before her reflecting the ivory folds of her gown. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the pearl earrings passed down by her grandmother. Emma, her maid of honor, leaned against the window frame and smiled at her friend, teasing that she had never seen her look so radiant. But then Emma froze, her eyes narrowing as something in the distance caught her attention. She leaned closer to the glass and whispered in disbelief, "Sophia, are those helicopters?" Sophia moved toward the window, her years of service before leaving the Navy sharpening her instincts immediately. The deep chopping rhythm of rotors was unmistakable. These were not news helicopters or photography drones meant to capture the big day. These were combat machines, fully loaded and moving fast. Her heart lurched as her trained ear identified the low growl of Seahawk engines. Emma's face showed only confusion. "Why would the military be here?" she muttered, but Sophia knew too well that unannounced arrivals of this nature rarely meant good news. She turned to her friend with steady calm and said, "Keep everyone away from the windows. Something is wrong." Outside, two dark helicopters descended into the chapel's adjacent parking lot, their movements precise, efficient, mechanical, the downwash scattered petals from the carefully arranged floral arches. Guests inside heard nothing yet, their chatter still rising with excitement. But Sophia knew the day was about to shatter. From the helicopters poured a squad of 8 heavily armed figures, their tactical gear glinting under the afternoon sun, rifles at the ready, every motion disciplined and exact. These were not ceremonial guards. These were warriors entering hostile ground, and their presence at her wedding was more than coincidence. At the altar, John shifted nervously as he checked his watch. His younger brother Michael gave him a reassuring nudge, reminding him that brides were always a little late. The string quartet played softly, violins painting the air with delicate notes, the acoustics of the chapel amplifying the beauty of every sound. To the guests, it was still a perfect wedding day. To John, it was the most important moment of his life. But beyond the carved doors of the chapel, fate had already redrawn the story. Commander Robert Cross led the unit through the main entrance, the heavy doors bursting open under their momentum. The sight of armored men carrying weapons turned the elegant hall into a scene of disbelief. Gasps rippled through the pews, flowers swayed as if recoiling from the sudden violence of reality. Robert's voice rang out, firm and commanding. He declared that everyone must evacuate. There was a bomb inside the building. Silence fell for a fraction of a second. Then chaos erupted. Some guests screamed and rushed for the exits. Others froze in their seats, unwilling to believe. John stared in confusion, his dream unraveling before his eyes, the carefully planned ceremony collapsing into a nightmare. He looked at the strangers shouting orders, his mind racing. But when Robert turned to him and said firmly that he must help guide the guests to safety, John snapped into action, leading people down aisles, his training as an architect helping him direct the flow through side doors and emergency exits he himself had studied when designing parts of the chapel restoration. Meanwhile, in the bridal suite, Sophia met Robert's gaze with recognition. He knew who she was. He addressed her formally, Lieutenant Blake, but Sophia raised a hand. "No titles today," she replied with a bitter edge. "What do you need?" Robert explained swiftly. Their detectors had confirmed a live device, sophisticated, heavy, counting down. Less than 4 minutes remained. His specialist displayed the screen with electromagnetic signatures, the glowing numbers of the timer already clawing their way toward 0. Sophia glanced down at her wedding gown, then back at the image of the bomb. Her decision crystallized in a heartbeat. She told Robert to clear everyone out. She had work to do. Emma grabbed her arm in desperation, begging her not to throw away her wedding day. But Sophia shook her head. "If I do nothing, there will be no wedding left to save." She kicked off her heels, her bare feet cold against the marble, and seized the bomb detection equipment. Her mind shifting from bride to soldier in an instant. Her posture straightened, her eyes hardened. The transformation was frighteningly natural. Years of training surged back, as if the white gown itself had become just another uniform. She began her sweep of the chapel, the device scanning for the electromagnetic pulse of explosives. Every second shaved away from the timer made her breath tighten. She passed rows of carved pews, floral arches, and delicate glass lanterns. Yet her eyes saw only structural supports, choke points, and possible blast radii. Robert's voice echoed in her earpiece. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. The chapel was a maze of beauty, hiding lethal intent. Sophia calculated where a bomb maker would hide a device for maximum devastation. Near load-bearing beams, under the altar, inside the sound system. She pressed forward, her instincts whispering that the threat was near the very heart of the ceremony. The timer dipped closer to 2 minutes when her scanner spiked. The altar arrangements glowed with interference. Her hands brushed aside roses and eucalyptus until she found it, a black casing threaded into the sound system wiring, a nest of circuits and plastic explosives packed tight, a digital display pulsing with death. 1 minute 40 seconds, Robert reported. Sophia exhaled slowly, steadying herself. This was no amateur device. The wiring was layered with decoys, redundant systems, booby traps meant to trick and punish hesitation. But she had seen devices like this before. She had learned to think like the architects of terror. Her fingers worked quickly, tracing the flow of power, following the rhythm of wires like a musician interpreting notes. Beneath the fear was clarity. Every connection told a story, every fuse a decision by the unseen enemy. She had to read their intentions like scripture. 30 seconds. Her heart slammed against her ribs, sweat slid across her neck. She isolated the relay, recognizing the type from past encounters, a fragile link between power and timer. If she cut wrong, the explosion would claim them all. If she cut right, the nightmare would freeze. 14 seconds. Her decision made. She pulled the connection. The timer halted. Silence filled the chapel, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. The device was neutralized. Robert confirmed it across the radio, relief shaking his tone even as he tried to remain professional. But Sophia's eyes stayed on the bomb, her jaw tightening. This was no isolated act. The craftsmanship was too refined, the materials too rare. Someone powerful had designed this, and someone dangerous was planning more. And Sophia knew in her heart, the wedding was only the beginning. The chapel still hummed with the echoes of fear as the last of the guests were escorted outside. The string quartet instruments lay abandoned on their chairs. The scent of roses now mingled with smoke from overturned candles. Sophia knelt by the altar, her gown stained with dust and wiring fragments. The silence felt heavier than the explosion that almost happened. John returned breathless from helping people into the courtyard, his eyes darting towards Sophia as he realized what she had done. He asked if it was true, if there had really been a bomb inside their wedding. Sophia did not answer immediately. She held the disarmed device in her hands, studying the craftsmanship, each circuit revealing a story of the unseen hand behind it. She finally spoke softly. Yes, there was, and whoever built this knew exactly what they were doing. Commander Robert approached her, his voice low but firm. Sophia, this was not an amateur job. His team's sensors had traced electronic fingerprints, the type found only in military-grade devices. He explained that weeks of intercepted communications had hinted at coordinated strikes against gatherings, weddings, parades, concerts, any place where joy gathered in fragile beauty. The messages had spoken of gifts that would never be forgotten. The Grand Vista Chapel was not a coincidence. It was a target chosen with intent. Sophia's stomach tightened as the weight of the truth settled. This was not about her, not about John, not about their wedding alone. It was about dozens of celebrations, maybe hundreds, people gathered in love, becoming victims of cruelty. She looked down at her dress, its whiteness smeared with grime, her heart torn between the life she wanted and the duty that called her name. Emma burst into the room, tears streaking her face. She clutched Sophia's arm, whispering that the guests were terrified but safe. She begged her to leave this to the military. to forget for one day who she used to be and focus on being a bride. But Sophia could not. Her hands still shook from the near disaster. She knew too much about bombs, too much about what came next. She told Emma that this was not over. Bombs rarely came alone. Robert's radio crackled with urgency. His intelligence officer reported signatures of similar devices at other venues. Within 50 miles, 2 more weddings were in danger: Rosewood Manor and Ocean View Pavilion, each with crowds of unsuspecting families and couples, each already marked for destruction. The words hung in the air like a noose. John stepped forward, his face pale. He asked what that meant. Were they saying more bombs were out there right now? Robert confirmed it. Yes, 2 devices at least, timed to detonate while ceremonies were still underway, and the clock was ticking. Sophia stood, the weight of her decision pressing down harder than the veil on her shoulders. She turned to Robert. "I'm coming with you," she said without hesitation. Emma gasped. John staggered as if struck, but Sophia's eyes burned with steady fire. John's voice cracked. "Sophia, this is our wedding. How can you walk out now to chase bombs?" His plea was filled with disbelief and fear, but Sophia touched his hand gently. Her gaze locking with his, she told him that what happened to the chapel would happen to others unless she acted, and she might be the only one with the skill to stop it. Robert studied her carefully. He knew she had been one of the best explosive specialists in her unit before leaving the Navy. Her record was a tapestry of impossible saves under impossible pressure. He also knew the look in her eyes was not of a woman seeking heroics. It was of someone who had already accepted that her own joy was secondary to the survival of others. John shook his head, saying surely other specialists could handle it. "Why her? Why today?" Sophia's voice softened. "Because I know their methods, because I can think like them, because if I walk away now and others die, I will never forgive myself." Robert's earpiece buzzed again. Reports detailed the timers. Rosewood Manor had just 25 minutes. Ocean View Pavilion perhaps 30. Time enough for one person to reach both if they moved immediately. Robert turned to Sophia and said, "If you come, we leave now. There will be no time to return for vows until it is over." Emma clung to her in desperation. John stood frozen between pride and heartbreak. The stained glass light washed over them as if heaven itself was testing their devotion. Sophia inhaled deeply, tasting the dust of her ruined ceremony, then nodded. "Let's go save some weddings." The SEAL team moved swiftly, escorting Sophia from the chapel. Guests in the courtyard watched in stunned silence as the bride stepped out, not toward her future husband, but toward a waiting helicopter, her gown fluttering against the rotor wash. Her bare feet now laced into combat boots handed by Robert's men. She looked like something between a saint and a soldier, the embodiment of sacrifice wrapped in lace and steel. John followed to the doors, his heart cracking as he saw her climb aboard. He called after her, asking about them, about their wedding, about their future. Sophia turned back once, her voice carrying over the roar. "Our guests are safe because I stayed. Others will only be safe if I go. Our wedding will wait, their lives cannot." The blades roared to life, lifting them into the air, the chapel shrinking below as if it were only a memory. Sophia looked down at John one last time, her chest aching, yet her resolve unbroken. The world blurred beneath them, fields and roads stretching out as Robert's team laid out maps, thermal scans, and intelligence packets. Rosewood Manor first, nestled in the rolling hills. 80 guests gathered in joy, unaware of the shadow creeping into their night. Sophia tightened her grip on the bomb kit, her heart steady, her soul torn. She whispered to herself that love could wait, but life could not. And as the horizon stretched before them, she knew that the war against fear had chosen her once again, even on the day that was supposed to belong only to love. The helicopter cut through the sky like a blade of steel against velvet, its vibrations shaking the air, while Sophia sat strapped in beside Robert and his men. Her hands gripped the bomb kit tightly. The ivory folds of her gown fluttered beneath the straps of borrowed tactical gear. Her mind divided between the memory of vows unspoken and the task that lay ahead. Below them the hills stretched endlessly, green and golden under the late afternoon sun. Within those hills lay Rosewood Manor, an estate of elegance, arched windows gleaming, terraces flowing with laughter, 80 guests unaware that death had been planted in their celebration. Sophia stared at the approaching shape of the mansion, her jaw tightening as she pictured the lives inside. Couples clinking glasses, children chasing each other in gardens, old grandparents smiling at young love. Robert leaned close, his voice carried over the hum of the rotor. Thermal scans confirmed the device signature inside the main reception hall. His team would control the evacuation quietly to prevent panic, while Sophia would search and disarm. Time was a predator running beside them, the timer already bleeding away precious minutes. The helicopter touched down behind tall hedges, concealed from the guests who still mingled in elegant attire. The SEAL team moved fast, shadows weaving between trees, their weapons low but ready. Robert led Sophia through a service entrance. The muffled sound of music and laughter floated from the ballroom. Violins and soft conversation painting a cruel contrast to the reality hidden within. Inside the reception hall, chandeliers glittered like constellations. The polished wooden floor reflected the swirl of dresses and polished shoes. Waiters carried trays of champagne. No one noticed the quiet arrival of armed men or the calm urgency in Sophia's eyes. Robert whispered into his radio. His team began the careful process of guiding guests outside, telling them there was a small issue with the generator, encouraging them toward the gardens. Most obeyed without suspicion, though a few resisted, confused, irritated, unaware that each second they argued stole breath from their own futures. Sophia moved among the tables, her bomb detector in hand, her eyes searching the familiar places where chaos liked to hide. Sound systems, central supports, catering equipment. She followed the rising pulse on her scanner until she reached the DJ booth at the far end of the hall. Speakers stacked high, cables running like veins across the floor. The reading spiked. Her heartbeat followed. She crouched behind the booth, fingers sweeping aside wires. And there it was, a device nearly identical to the one she had disarmed at the chapel, plastic explosives woven into the soundboard, circuits hidden beneath knobs and sliders, a timer glowing relentlessly. 18 minutes left. She exhaled, steady, remembering every lesson, every failure and success from her training. The maker of these bombs had learned the same lessons, had crafted devices to resist dismantling, but patterns remained, patterns only someone who lived in the dark dance of bombs and wires would recognize. Her hands moved with grace, tracing each wire, cataloging each circuit, her mind a map of intention. She whispered softly to herself, not prayers but calculations, choices layered upon choices. Every second her world balanced on a thin thread of copper. Emma's face flashed in her memory. John's voice echoed. She forced herself to focus. Love could distract, but love could also anchor. She thought of saving them, saving everyone, as her trembling fingers slid a connector free. 10 minutes remained when she found the primary fail-safe. An attempt to mislead. She smiled faintly at the cunning of the unknown enemy. But she had seen this trick before in desert cities far away. Her hand bypassed the false lead and pressed deeper into the heart of the machine. 7 minutes. The guests had been mostly cleared. Robert whispered in her ear that the hall was nearly empty. She nodded silently, though her eyes never left the tangle of death before her. 5 minutes. Sweat dripped from her temples. Each breath felt heavy. She located the main power route. The same relay type as before, reliable, recognizable. The maker's fingerprint, her lips pressed tight. 3 minutes. She steadied herself, adjusted her grip. One mistake would turn the reception into fire and ruin. She pulled the relay. The timer froze, silence heavy as stone. She whispered, device neutralized, though no one heard but herself. Robert's team swept in, confirming safety. The last guests guided back inside to reassure them. The bride and groom trembling but alive, their eyes wide with gratitude as they realized how close their joy had come to ashes. They hugged Sophia, thanking her through tears, begging her to stay, to celebrate with them. But she only shook her head, whispering that there was still another wedding, another bomb, another storm waiting at the edge of the horizon. The reception resumed shakily, couples clinging tighter, families grateful for life, laughter breaking through sobs, love stronger because of survival. Sophia stood among them like a ghost, part of their salvation, but not part of their celebration. She turned back toward the waiting helicopter, her gown darker now, streaked with sweat and grease, her eyes fixed on the next destination. Robert joined her, his tone a mixture of respect and worry. He told her the Ocean View Pavilion bomb was even more advanced according to the scans, motion sensors, anti-tamper systems. More complexity than the first two. He asked her if she was ready. Sophia did not answer with words. She only tightened the straps on her gear, climbing back into the helicopter. As they rose again into the twilight sky, the sun dipping low over the horizon, Sophia felt the ache in her chest deepen. She had saved 2 weddings, 2 families, countless lives. But John's face remained in her mind. Hurt, confused, abandoned, she whispered his name under her breath, promising silently that she would return, that love would not be left behind in the ashes of duty. The sea glimmered in the distance, vast and endless, the pavilion waiting upon the cliffs like a jewel balanced above waves. Robert's voice broke the silence. "We are heading into the hardest part now." And Sophia nodded, knowing the truth. The war was far from over, and the day meant for love had become a battlefield. The helicopter skimmed low over the coastline, the roar of its blades echoing against the cliffs. Below stretched the endless expanse of the ocean, its waves smashing against rocks like drums of war. And ahead, perched upon the very edge of stone and sea, the Ocean View Pavilion waited, white walls gleaming under the fading light, its terrace filled with guests who laughed and toasted as the sun dipped toward the horizon, unaware that their celebration sat atop a hidden storm. Sophia watched the scene approach, her heart a knot of duty and grief. The beauty of the moment stabbed at her soul. How fragile joy was, how quickly it could be turned into mourning. She thought of John once more, standing outside the chapel as she was lifted away. She thought of what he must be feeling, but she forced her focus forward. She had chosen this path. Others' lives depended on her calm hands. Robert's team reviewed the scans. The device at this location was unlike the others, larger, with multiple redundancies, sensors capable of detecting movement. The slightest disturbance could trigger it. The intelligence officer warned that if it was touched without precision, it would detonate instantly. This was not just a bomb. It was a trap set for anyone bold enough to disarm it. The helicopter set down on a service road. Engines fading, Sophia stepped out, her gown snapping in the salty wind. Combat gear strapped across silk, her hair whipped by the ocean breeze. She looked like a warrior from 2 worlds, one of vows and veils, the other of wires and war. The pavilion was alive with celebration. Couples moving from the ceremony to the reception hall, laughter drifting like music across the sea. Robert's men spread out, directing staff and guests slowly toward the gardens under the guise of a safety check, each movement precise, calm, so as not to awaken panic. Sophia, meanwhile, pressed forward, her scanner glowing with rising signals, her steps leading her to the heart of the threat. Inside the reception hall, the decor was breathtaking. Glass walls revealed the vast ocean beyond. Lanterns hung like stars, flowers cascaded across tables. But beneath that beauty, Sophia felt the weight of hidden death. Her scanner pulsed heavily near the stage where the band had been setting up. She crouched low, slipping behind equipment cases, and there it was, a device more elaborate than she had ever seen outside a battlefield. Cylinders of explosives wired with meticulous care, sensors embedded like eyes, ready to trigger at the faintest wrong move. The timer displayed 20 minutes, though Sophia knew in her bones that 20 minutes was a lie, a mask to make her rush. Bombs like these were layered with deception. She inhaled slowly, clearing her thoughts. Each bomb she had faced had been a conversation with its maker, a duel of intellect and nerve. This one was the loudest yet. It dared her to try, dared her to falter. Her hands moved carefully, peeling away casing, tracing wires, each connection a puzzle. She spoke softly under her breath, not prayers but questions. Why did you place this circuit here? What did you hope I would think? She treated the bomb as if it were a living opponent, because in truth it was the mind of its creator still lingered in its construction. 18 minutes. Robert's voice came through the comms. Evacuation nearly complete, But Sophia barely heard him. Her world had narrowed to wires and signals, to the delicate dance of cutters and connectors. Her scanner indicated motion sensors tied to the main charge, meaning if the device were lifted even slightly, it would trigger. She adjusted her approach, working from inside outward, disarming not by force, but by unraveling the logic of the design. 12 minutes, sweat dripped in her eyes. The ocean crashed below, each wave a reminder of what failure would mean. Glass shattering, bodies falling, screams lost to the wind. She pushed the thought away, grounding herself in the rhythm of her breathing. 10 minutes. She located the primary loop, disguised beneath a mess of decoys. She knew if she followed the obvious wire, she would set it off. The maker wanted her to take the easy route. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. Not today. 7 minutes. Her fingers hovered over a relay she recognized, the same brand she had seen in the earlier bombs. Her suspicion grew. The maker was repeating patterns, confident that even if someone survived the first, they would falter on the last. But Sophia's memory was sharper than their arrogance. 5 minutes. Robert whispered that guests were clear. They were safe. But his tone told her he did not believe she was. She ignored the warning. Time was a blade against her throat now. She had to choose. 3 minutes. Her chest tightened, her fingers trembling. She pressed them still against the floor, forcing the nerves away, focusing only on the current that pulsed through the circuits, the heartbeat of the machine. She saw it then, the flaw, the hidden bridge between the main power and the timer, a bridge that should not exist unless it was meant to be cut. 2 minutes. She steadied herself, cut the bridge clean. Silence filled the circuits. The timer froze. The sensors dimmed. The bomb fell lifeless. Her breath shuddered free. Her shoulders sagged. She whispered into the calm. Device neutralized. Robert's cheer was muffled but clear, his men sweeping back into the hall, their relief unhidden. The pavilion was saved, the families reunited, tears and embraces erupting outside as guests realized what had been averted. Sophia remained crouched by the dismantled device, staring at the maze of wires now harmless. She knew she had just outwitted a mind as skilled as hers, perhaps more so, and that terrified her more than the bomb itself. When she rose at last, the ocean stretched endlessly beyond the glass, a horizon of peace disguising danger. She wiped sweat from her brow, her gown clinging damp to her skin, her soul weary yet unbroken. Robert approached her, his voice carrying respect. 3 weddings saved, no casualties. He told her she had done the impossible. Sophia only nodded, her gaze still distant. She thought of John, thought of the vows unsaid, the guests waiting at the chapel, her heart heavy with longing. The helicopter waited once again, ready to return her to where her day had begun. The cliffside pavilion shrinking behind them as the rotors lifted. Sophia leaned back in her seat, eyes closing for a moment, not in rest, but in preparation, for she knew that though the bombs were silenced, the consequences were only beginning. The helicopter cut across the night sky, carrying Sophia back toward the chapel, where her wedding had begun and where it had been torn apart. She sat in silence, her bomb kit resting on her lap, her gown streaked with dirt and sweat, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her mind still alert. She replayed every step, every wire cut, every second stolen from death. Yet her thoughts circled always back to John, his face in the chapel doorway, his voice breaking as he called her name. The Grand Vista Chapel came into view, lights glowing like a beacon in the dark. Guests had gathered in the courtyard, speaking in clusters, their voices hushed with the weight of what had happened. John stood apart from them, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on the sky as the helicopter descended. When Sophia stepped out, her boots crunching against gravel, his breath caught, relief and anger battling within him. She approached him slowly, the sound of the rotors fading behind her. She looked into his eyes, her heart heavy. She said softly that the bombs had been disarmed, 3 weddings saved, no lives lost. John swallowed hard, pride and pain mingling in his gaze. He told her he was grateful, but he needed to know if this was what their life would always be, if their future meant losing her to danger again and again. Sophia's chest ached at his words. She told him this was who she was, someone who could not ignore danger, someone who would always protect when others could not. She reminded him that she had not chosen this moment. It had chosen her. If she had walked away, people would have died. John turned his face aside, struggling with the truth. Emma came to them then, tears still staining her cheeks. She embraced Sophia tightly, whispering that the guests were alive because of her, that she had been a bride and a savior in the same breath. Sophia returned the embrace, grateful but weary, knowing that saving strangers was easier than saving her own love. The chapel doors opened quietly. Robert entered with a few of his men, their expressions softened by respect. He told Sophia she had done more in a single day than most teams could accomplish in months. He invited her to continue helping, to work with them beyond this day. But he also told her she had earned her wedding, that she should finish what she began before the world intruded. Jean looked at her then, his jaw clenched, his eyes wet. He said if she could walk through bombs and come back alive, he could walk through fear and stand beside her. He told her he still wanted to marry her, not the perfect bride in a white dress, but the woman who risked everything for strangers, the woman whose strength scared him but also made him proud. Sophia felt tears rise, the walls inside her heart softening. She asked him if he was sure, if he could live with a life filled with unpredictability. He nodded, saying that if the choice was between losing her to danger or losing her by walking away, he would rather fight the storms with her than stand alone in peace. The chapel was cleared, candles lit once more, though the flowers were dusted and some pews were empty. The air felt sacred again, intimate, stronger for the trials endured. The guests who remained gathered quietly, family and friends who had refused to leave, the SEAL team standing like silent guardians at the back. Sophia and John stood before the altar, her dress no longer pristine, his suit wrinkled from chaos, but their eyes locked with a power that made everything else disappear. The minister spoke the vows, reminding them that love was tested not by easy days, but by storms, and that theirs had survived fire before even beginning. Sophia answered firmly that she did, promising to face not only the joys but the dangers of life with him. John answered in turn, saying he would stand beside her through bombs or celebrations, through chaos or calm. They exchanged rings with trembling hands, not out of fear but out of awe, knowing their love had already been forged in fire. The kiss that followed was not delicate but fierce, the kind born from survival, from nearly losing everything. The guests cheered softly, some still wiping tears. Emma clutched her bouquet tighter. Robert nodded with respect, his men standing straighter as if honoring comrades. The reception that followed was small, quiet, not the grand feast they had planned, yet it was more powerful than anything they could have imagined. Laughter returned slowly. Children danced in the aisles. Families held each other longer than before. John and Sophia sat together at last, his hand never leaving hers, her head resting against his shoulder. In the weeks that followed, news of the foiled attack spread. Sophia was called a hero, though she never claimed the title. She was promoted, her expertise requested for a new task force dedicated to protecting gatherings from terror. She accepted, not for fame, but because she knew there would always be more bombs, more threats, and she was one of the few who could stop them. John opened his own path too, using his skills as an architect to design spaces safer, stronger, places where celebrations could happen without fear. Together they built a life where love and duty walk side by side, sometimes clashing, sometimes weaving together, always demanding courage. Months later, standing on their porch overlooking a quiet morning, Sophia told John she had once feared that her duty would steal her marriage. But now she saw it differently. It had shaped their bond, revealed its depth. John smiled, telling her that if he had to marry her again in the middle of another storm, he would, without hesitation. Sophia looked out at the horizon, the sunlight painting gold across the sky, and whispered that love was the strongest disarmament of all, stronger than wires, stronger than fear. It was the one promise that no explosion could destroy. And so the bride who had defused 3 bombs on her wedding day carried both vows and scars, both joy and duty, and in that balance found a truth unshakable, that life is not measured by the days that go as planned, but by the moments when courage transforms chaos into love.